I call the Honourable Member Eugenie Sage. Tēnā koe, Ms. Sage.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Like others in this House, I'm not pleased to be speaking on retrospective legislation, but am pleased to take a call on the Kaipara District Council Validation of Rates and Other Matters Bill to explain the Green Party's position and why we are supporting the bill. And would like to congratulate the Office of the Auditor-General for their very thorough report and inquiry into what happened with the Mangawhai wastewater scheme. It tells the story of what happened over the 15 years of the project's life and sets out the facts as the Auditor-General understands them in what she describes as a woeful saga. And it's written in a very clear and accessible way, and it is very easy to read. What the Auditor-General says that she was shocked by the state of the Kaipara District Council's records and its loose approach to decision-making, given that it's involved a huge amount of investigation and effort to actually analyse, piece together and describe what happened. And certainly many submitters told the Select Committee that the Kaipara Council had failed to meet its fundamental obligations both legally and in terms of its accountability to the community. And the Auditor-General has confirmed that Council didn't have a grasp at all really of the very complex contractual, financial and borrowing arrangements that it was involved in relation to the wastewater scheme, and it effectively lost control of that scheme and the cost of it blew out. So it's been a saga of poor governance, of poor management, poor record keeping, and a council which was completely out of its depth in terms of decision making. And one of the other reasons we'd like to comment on the report is the way in which the Auditor-General and her staff have done a very thorough review and a full and frank disclosure of the significant inadequacies in the way in which one of the office's business units, Audit New Zealand, did its work, particularly between 2006 and 2009. And as the Auditor-General admits, and I quote, that some of the audit work has fallen disappointingly short of expected standards. And some of the problems there are just the whole quality of the documentation supporting the audit judgments. As Phil Twyford noted, the failure by the auditors to reassess the status of the wastewater scheme despite the significant changes to it, and the over-reliance of Audit New Zealand on the information that council management was providing. So there are a number of lessons that can be learned from reading this report, and that other councils throughout New Zealand, particularly councillors and staff, would do well to read, to look at whether they have the capacity to effectively control what is being done on their behalf when work is contracted out. But this is little consolation to the people of Kaipara and particularly to the people of Mangawhai, because it's been their rates that have increased significantly in order to repay the cost of the blowout in the scheme. They are paying for the incompetence and poor governance by the council. And it's there that we share with Labour the need for government to take action. Because the Chair of the Commissioners, John Robertson, said in a media release in February, and I quote, "At some point, Council may wish to take action against the decision makers involved in issues at Mangawhai. We don't want to prejudice our legal position by including this in the bill. The Commissioners wanted to keep their options open for seeking redress on behalf of ratepayers." Now, in the Commissioners' terms of reference, two of their key tasks are to engage with the community and iwi to rebuild trust and confidence in the Council and to, I quote, ensure financial resilience and equitable and sustainable funding. The Commissioners have applied a huge amount of effort to getting the Council's finances on a clear footing going forward. Now they need to apply that same energy to seeking redress for ratepayers to reduce the debt burden on Council and to restore the community's trust in Council by putting it on a sustainable footing. It was the Minister of Local Government who appointed the commissioners and to whom the commissioners report. So he has a very real responsibility here in ensuring that there is that sustainable solution. Mr Chair?
Ms Eugenie Sage.
And reducing the debt burden on ratepayers is essential and central to ensuring that the Council is financially resilient and is sustainable in the longer term. And while the Auditor-General didn't find any illegality in what happened in Kaipara, the factual situation which this report outlines is a very strong platform for the Kaipara Commissioners and others to consider taking legal action against a range of parties to share the burden of those cost blowouts. And we agree here with New Zealand First that the Commissioners should consider pursuing companies such as Becker's, Bell Gully, the directors of the now defunct EPS, EarthTech, and also Audit New Zealand and their insurers, given their admission of inadequacies in undertaking the audit role. It shouldn't be ratepayers who are lumbered with the whole bill for the Council's incompetence and mismanagement of the contracts involved in constructing the wastewater scheme. The scheme started out as a public-private partnership. Initially a build, own, operate and transfer, which morphed into a design, build, finance and operate model, a very different type of contracting arrangement with quite substantially increased risks to Council. A public-private partnership is about shared responsibility. It's not about the public, in the form of the Kaipara community and ratepayers, picking up the tab for everything that went wrong with this scheme and then having private sector engineering, consulting, construction companies, law firms and the banks all just collecting their fees, their interest on the loans, the profits and then just wandering off into the sunset. The private companies involved, to preserve their reputation, must step up and must bear some of the responsibility and contribute to the burden of reducing the costs of the blowout. Because otherwise the public cannot have any confidence in public-private partnerships being used to construct major new infrastructure such as wastewater schemes and public transport form of light rail, if citizens and ratepayers are going to be left to carry the can and private companies can simply, and the banks can simply profit by taking their fees. So the Auditor-General has been very frank in investigating and outlining the shortcomings of Audit New Zealand, and certainly Mr Sabin in his public statements has focused on Audit New Zealand contributing to reducing the burden on ratepayers and the need for a financial settlement. But the net must be cast much wider and the Commissioners must look at the professional and contractual responsibilities of all of those involved with the EcoCare scheme. It's not just fair to put it on Audit New Zealand because it's owned up. The net has got to go a lot wider. And we think that some of the work that the Auditor-General has done in reconstituting the records of the Kaipara Council and actually finding out what did happen may help in pursuing that legal action, because it's fundamentally unfair if it just rests on ratepayers. And we'd like to just finish by commenting briefly on the Supplementary Order Paper 406 in Andrew Williams' name. Like Labor, we considered very carefully the issues involved in this, met with Dr Palmer, Legal Counsel for the Mangawhai Residents and Ratepayers Association, looked and recognised the important constitutional principles about Parliament not overriding existing court action, in this case the Mangawhai Residents and Ratepayers Judicial Review proceedings in the High Court. This bill doesn't explicitly prevent that legal case from proceeding, but in validating the mistakes in the rating resolutions, it will, of course, remove some of the legal grounds for the Association's actions. But we won't be voting for the SOP because we believe that Parliament is sovereign, and while Mangawhai residents have been unjustly treated by Council, supporting the SOP would do a greater injustice to the wider Kaipara community, because the bigger Kaipara community needs financial stability. It needs the Council to have a clear plan for the future. that means council must have the certainty that it can levy and collect rates to fund council services from roading to stormwater to waste collection and libraries. We don't see there being any benefit in the council being made insolvent, and that's why we support the bill.
Maggie Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.